We're good. Okay, well, welcome everybody to Fieldstone4U. We just love these events because it's a way for us to stay connected to all of you, and it's a way for us to respond to your needs. So the history of Fieldstone4U, for those of you that have not been on one of our calls, is this came out of the pandemic, and we wanted to be responsive to your needs, and we just kept asking, you know, what do you need? Our tagline is, you ask and we listen. And then after we listen, then Robin and I hustle and we go and find a wonderful speaker to meet your needs. And this particular one came out of a conversation that our speaker and I had. And then we sent a survey out to all of you. And the response was super positive that people wanted to hear about self-care. And so I'll get to Jamie's introductions in just a sec, but it's going to be an incredible time with her, and we're very fortunate that we have her in our network who can provide this information for us. So if you have specific needs, please feel free to send Robin or me an email, and then I'm happy to go and find a speaker. If you have, if you're an expert in a particular area, something you would like to share with our network, also you can reach out to me and we can set up a Zoom, because it looks like we will be doing these for a while. So, you know, we used to have our Fieldstone at fours, which are our quarterly gatherings, and we would have our Crossroads and Turning Points, which is our speaker series. So both of those, because they are in-person events, we are not able to have. And so this is what we're doing in the meantime. And I'm just extremely grateful that we've been able to maintain the level of engagement that we've had. So again, I don't feel like I haven't seen some of you in months and months and months. It feels like I see you all the time. So anyway, so that's the history of Fieldstone4U. A little bit of housekeeping. If you would please mute your phone or your laptop or your iPad or desktop so that we don't have any background noise. That way, when Jamie is speaking, it will stay on Jamie's slides. And then if you have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and then that way Jamie can address your questions as she sees them. Just, you know, and we kind of let that go. We never know ahead of time how many people are going to participate. We don't ask for people to pre-register because we know that your schedules are so chaotic. So what we do is we record these, and then Robin puts it on the YouTube channel. So feel free to go to our website or go to any of my emails or Robin's emails, and the YouTube link is in our signature line. And then you can access all of the videos that we have had. The only ones that we don't record are our learning groups, because obviously those are confidential, but these are public and you can share them with your colleagues and anybody that you'd like. I'd like to thank Janet Buck, who I don't believe is on yet, but Janet Buck with First Republic, they're our sponsor of these wonderful events. So Janet Buck is incredible. Robin and I were on a call with her today. She makes herself so available to us, and she has even spoken on one of these regarding the PPP loans. So we want to definitely thank Janet for her participation. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our speaker, Dr. Jamie Velasquez. I've never called her doctor, but I guess I should. She is the Director of Staff Development at Crittenden Services for Children and Families. And Jamie is also a member of our book club this year. And we had such an incredible group this year that we've decided to meet again. Yay, Gina. We've decided to meet again, and we're going to continue this group next year. So we do have a couple spots open, so I'm going to just do a little plug for that. If you are interested in joining our reading group, we meet monthly. We're starting in October this year, and right now we're planning on just meeting out at a park by Fieldstone. We'll bring beach chairs, we'll have lunches for you, and we're really excited to come together again. And Jamie has been an incredible contributor to our reading group, very insightful. So when she and I started chatting about all the things that she does and that training is her job, I thought, oh, it just makes perfect sense. And Fieldstone's all about reciprocity. So it's not just, you know, Jamie coming to a book club and gleaning everything. Jamie gives as much as she receives. And it's evident today because she's giving back to all of us. So without further ado, I cannot wait to introduce Jamie, who is going to talk about how we can integrate self-care into our life, because I know that I, for one, am exhausted, overwhelmed, and overloaded. So Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So welcome. Hopefully we'll have a good time here together today. So I'm first going to talk about, if I can, if it'll let me, what it is. So when we talk a lot about self-care or energy management or work-life balance, I have a really good friend of mine who said work-life balance is a lie. It doesn't exist. So when we look at work-life balance, I tend to go with a different philosophy, and instead of balance, look at harmony. So if we think about balance, we think of everything being equal on both sides. And sometimes life doesn't happen that way. Sometimes one thing needs a little more energy than another. If your kids are sick, it's not like you go, well, I still have to work for 8 hours today. You go and you take care of your kiddos. So things shift. So when we think about that, part of it is that shift, that it's not just about evenness in life, it's really more about finding that harmony. And if you think of harmony in sort of a music standpoint, there are different levels to it, right? And so different voices come in at different times. So keeping that in mind, there are a couple philosophies. So the first philosophy is what's referred to as the 4-burner theory. And the 4-burner theory believes that you have 4 burners in life, and they function for family, health, friends, and work. And when you're young and you don't necessarily have a family you have to take care of because you get to do whatever you want to do, you're probably going to have your health, or we don't really think about our health when we're young. You're probably going to have your friends burning more, and then your work burning more. And when you get to your career, that work's going to burn a little bit more. And then as you get a family, you turn the burner on. But if you have an older stove, you can't burn all 4 burners at the top and expect your food to cook the same speed. So it's that idea that you have to pick where you're going to put your gas, right? So that's the 4-burner model. So it's one idea to think about how we move things around. My mentor, whom I love dearly, talks about the hurricane theory. So she was a newspaper editor on the city desk of a newspaper, which may give you an idea of how old she is. But she said that she functioned on the hurricane theory, which is when you're at work, you're at work. And when you're at home, unless there's a hurricane. And when there's a hurricane, you stay wherever the hurricane is. So again, if your kids are sick, you stay home and take care of your kids. If there's a breaking story and you're going to be late to go home, then there's a breaking story and you focus on that. But if we think about a lot of the work that we do, I say, but what if it's always hurricane season, right? What if there's always a million things going on? And that's kind of where we are right now, right? Like everything is a hurricane. I don't know about you, but I have 2 kids that are school aged. And so every day it's an unknown of what's going to happen. And so what are we deciding? Is it distance learning? Is it homeschooling? Is it the blended when we're clear, what have you? So when we think about all of those different theories, the way that it's easiest to think about for me, and so I'm going to share, is it's not about finding what takes precedence. It's about how do we manage our energy. And so when we think about energy, we have to think about what we have and what we have going on. So why do we care? Because it's always important to know why. Because we live in a hustle culture. So it is always about no one cares, work harder, right? You can sleep when you're dead. You got to do more. You got to keep going. You got to keep struggling. The quote in the middle is from A League of Their Own, which is one of my favorite movies and both of my kiddos. Of course, it's hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great, right? So it's that idea that the struggle is real. And the other fact is that the work's not going to get any easier. So we work in nonprofit, right? No one's going to, unless you're Robin, no one's going to throw you $10,000 on a Thursday afternoon for your alumni group, right? So like money's not coming out of the woodwork for all of us. So it's all about how do you figure out ways to do more with less? This is real. This is where we live in all the time. You're not going to find more hours in your day. So my dad talks about pickles. My dad's a lawyer, so he would have people who would ask for free consultations, and he would say, if I was a shop salesman, I don't know why he went with pickles, but he did. If I was in a shop and you came in and ate half of my pickle, I couldn't sell my pickle to anybody else. So a lot of us work where our brain and our time is really what's the most valuable, and we only have 24 pickles in our jar. So what are we going to spend our pickles on is really what we're thinking about. So when we think about that, this is why we're going to talk about this, because I'm not going to tell you how, I'm going to tell you why we care first. Because we have to pay attention to our window of tolerance. So our window of tolerance is based on what can we handle. And so our optimal zone, and we may not all be in our optimal zone right now, is where we're doing our best work. So when we get triggered, when we get exhausted, when we get overwhelmed, we go into that hyper or hypoarousal. So the example that was used, and I'm going to steal it because it's when it was used when I was trained, but it's if you open the fridge, and when you open the fridge, there's a glass of milk at the top of the fridge and it falls and it gets all over your fridge. I've actually done this before, so I identify with this story. there's a whole nother story that goes with that with my son, but it goes all over the place. In the hypoarousal stage, you freak out. You start throwing other things in the fridge, like to hell with it, just throw some eggs on the floor too. You just freak out because you're overwhelmed. You just can't handle it anymore. And it's explosive. In the hypoarousal, you just lay down in the milk and start making milk angels, because just embrace it, embrace the mess, and just lean into it. It's chaos. So if we think about how we respond to that, both of those are not good places to be. And we've probably been in those places on and off throughout the last 4 or 5 months, right? So they're just sometimes when you're overwhelmed, I've done this before, my kids are just going crazy and I literally just go, just don't kill each other, and I walk out of the room, right? It's not the best place to be. I'm not doing my best work as mom, but that's where it is. So we care about that because when we're in those two spaces, we can't handle anymore. If we can't handle anymore, we're not going to be able to do anything. So how do we get out of that? So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do we manage our energy so we don't fall in those two places. You can also go into a place where you're both. So you look like you're calm, but inside you could be raging. So that is a possibility too. So just think about that. And I want to think about how you respond to things, because I tend to go hypoarousal 90% of the time. I just kind of drop down. And often when we go hypo, and if you think about the people in your life, if people drop to that hypoarousal, usually just let them go, right? If there's a kid who's stewing in the back of the room, we don't give that kid extra attention. It's the kid who starts throwing things that we start giving extra attention to. So we need to make sure that we pay attention to both of those sides of things. So I want you to also think about, so how do you respond? So into either one of those, right? So what are the symptoms that you're getting near the edge of your window of tolerance? So are you moving to that hyperarousal state? So I can tell you that when I get stressed, I feel it in my shoulders. If I'm being angered in a moment, I can feel it in my arms. I feel it in my gut. Like there are physical sensations that I feel. And when I feel it over time, I know exactly where my knots are in my shoulders. My kids can walk up to me and point to where my knots are in my shoulders. My older son has them in the exact same place. So does my father. So, you know, there's that genetic love passing down. But think about what happens when you're stressed, and go ahead and put it in the chat if you would like to share. But what physical symptoms do you have when you start to get more and more stressed? What does it feel like? Is it headaches? Is it stomach aches? Is it insomnia, which can also fall in that psychological section? What are those things that you feel? Start to feel hot. Yeah, so like a physical warming of the body can happen. So why we care about this is because this is stomach, cortisol rising, absolutely. Hair falling out. Yeah, stress can impact our hair, and everybody's graying more right now. So, you know, that's always fun. Overeating. So I've heard it referred to as protection pounds instead of COVID weight gain or whatever, the COVID-15. So we're trying to protect ourselves sort of thing. So I'm going to go with that. So the protection pound. Skin issues. Yes, skin rashes can happen. You can be irritated with things, tightness in the chest, headache and tightness in the neck. I wanted to cut off my neck the other day. My husband reminded me it's necessary for life. So I didn't, obviously. But again, so thinking about those sorts of things. So paying attention. And here's the next question. How many of you, when you start to feel these things, do you stop what you're doing and relax? And how many of you grab some Advil or Tylenol? How many of you just power through and keep on going, right? Like we don't listen to the body's suggestions of you may need to rest, right? That's not what we're trained to do. We're trained to just keep going, just keep moving. So I have woken up, I didn't wake up with it today. Today is the first day in a week I have not woken up with a headache. But every morning I took some drugs and I went to work, right? So, because that's what we do. So paying attention to those sorts of things. Behaviorally, how do we respond? Do we get testy with people? Are we more likely to ignore things? Are we more likely to get really angry about very small things? So how are those ways, like what things do we do that can impact what we do? You can see how much stress I am under by looking at my desk at home. That's all you have to do. And if it's organized, I'm good. And if there's chaos, my desk is a physical manifestation of my brain. And so whenever, if you want to, that's just how you know where I am. Because if I leave it in chaos at the end of the day, that's where I am. Otherwise, everything's always organized and put away. I was raised by a Marine, so there's a place for everything and everything in its place, right? So thinking about those sorts of things. And then psychologically, do we avoid with carbs, or do we make mistakes? Yeah, do we forget things? We forget sometimes that our memory, our ability to remember things, if you're a mom, that mommy mush brain that people like to talk about is because you have lack of sleep, right? And so if you don't have enough sleep, so you can actually build those neural connections in your brain, you're going to start forgetting things. So simple things. You walk into the other room, you don't know why you went there. That increases when we're under stress. And so that idea, I have been mid-thought, mid-conversation and forgotten what I was going to say sometimes. And so it doesn't mean we're all suffering dementia, so don't stress about that. But it's that idea that the more stressed we are, the more likely that's going to happen. Psychologically, how do we navigate that, right? So insomnia can be part of that. How we eat, drinking, self-medicating, buying stuff we really don't need on Amazon Prime because it's a great deal. All those sorts of things are kind of how we can navigate some of those symptoms. So we really want to think about that, because those are our warning signs, as if we're moving from our window of tolerance to move out of that window of tolerance to that hypo or hyperarousal. Because as you start to forget things, then you start to get frustrated, and then someone calls you on it, and then you lash out. And so that's what we want to try and avoid. So why do we care about that? This is why we care. And so that's really important. We're going to skip that part. So here's the point you really want to know. So how do we do energy management? So a lot of times we think about energy management as you get sleep and you eat things and all this kinds of fun stuff. You do marathons on Netflix. So here's my question. How many of you have ever felt completely overwhelmed, and so you decide, I'm just going to watch Netflix and chill all day? And then at the end of the day, you feel gross, completely unproductive. Your head hurts because you've been watching TV in a dark room, right? Like, it's just like nothing good has happened, right? So this is not really what we're talking about when we're talking about self-care, energy management. I like to refer to this as pampered procrastination. So what does that mean? So it's the idea that self-care is not as exciting as people want it to be. What it really is like car maintenance, right? So if we really, and this doesn't mean we always do it. And so I told my boss today, I was like, I'm doing a training on self-care on all the things I should be doing. So I'm going to own it. It doesn't mean it's because I'm training this that I do it all. I'm working on it still. But it's about, do we move enough? Do we drink enough water? Are we eating the right things? Are we getting enough sunlight? Are we connecting enough with people? And when we're connecting enough with people, are we also saying no to the people we don't want to be connecting with that aren't necessarily healthy for us, right? Like, we get to decide who gets to be in our life. And we all have friends whom we love dearly because we've been friends with them for forever, but they are energy vampires, right? And if you know those people who suck you dry, this is not the time to make sure they're okay, right? You need to make sure that your cup is full before you start going in and checking all those people. So when we talk about this, self-care is not just another thing to do. There's a million lists out there where you can color in dots and figure out what you want to do, but it really relates to 6 elements. And so this is the meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about. When you think about where you are, think about where you're feeling the most exhausted, and think about where you're feeling like you have nothing left to give, right? And that's where you need to give your self-care. So physical self-care is movement, diet, exercise, right? Do you have air? Do you have shelter? Do you have the right food to energize your body? Do you eat things that make you feel better in the moment, but 5 hours later make you feel disgusting, right? So those sorts of things, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about physical self-care. And so making sure you give yourself permission to get those needs met, right? Emotional self-care is just that. How many of you, and you are welcome to raise your hand or make any sort of symbol, have emotionally exhausting jobs? So it's not just the work you do can be exhausting. It's you deal with trauma. You deal with horrific stories and injustice and everything else. So going to work, I mean, I just sat through a CSEC training. For those of you who don't know, CSEC is the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So it's not a happy topic for a Thursday afternoon, right? So what are we doing emotionally? So what does this mean? It means you don't go home and watch Law and Order SVU on repeat, right? It means you pay attention to how much time you're spending watching the news. It means that you watch the happy things that you like to watch, even if it's brainless TV. So My Cousin Vinny is a favorite of mine. Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's one of my go-tos for when I need something fun, right? So are you making sure that you're feeding the need for your emotional need? Are you connecting with the people who build you up versus doom scrolling, as they say? Your spiritual self-care is really that idea of, are you connected to something? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, are you going to church, but it means, are you connected to something bigger than yourself? Sometimes it means that we have to sit down and just give ourselves time to meditate, or to just think, or to just walk outside, or think about, as much chaos is going on right now in the world, we are a speck and we circle a bright giant star in the sky as we're in our solar system in this giant galaxy. Like, so when we really think about the grand scheme of things, we are very, very minuscule, right? But we think about our life here is huge. And so it seems so exhausting. Simon Sinek talks about the infinite game. And if we lived longer, we would have lived through another pandemic. So this wouldn't seem so hard to us. So it's trying to put those things into context of how do we navigate that spiritual connection. So finding if it is going to church, or finding that, if it's doing your own personal reflection, if it's meditation, whatever it is, but finding that connection to something bigger. Intellectual self-care is where I nerd out, because that's where I love to go. I will also acknowledge it is my coping mechanism. Oh, Chopped is great for mindless TV. I love Chopped. Sorry. But it's that idea of, how are we feeding our brain? Or are we feeding our brain? So sometimes, particularly in my line of work, because I do training, there's a lot where I'm putting things out, and I'm constantly creating and I'm putting things out. And if it's a training that I've done before, I don't always do as much prep in the beginning. So I have to feed my brain too. So it's making sure that I'm putting in as much as I'm putting out. And sometimes the putting in, I like to do spurts of the putting in. So that idea of how much is going on, because if you have one too much than another, you feel exhausted and drained. Not to mention, I tell my husband this all the time, I have a very high need for cognition. So I cannot do reality TV. It's not a judgment. If you love the Real Housewives, I am not going to judge you in any way, shape, or form. I just can't do it. So when we watch TV, I don't necessarily watch things that are always mindless, right? Like, I have to find this middle ground. I have to be in the right mood for some things. Although I feel like Brooklyn Nine-Nine really does meet all of my needs. So I cannot plug that show enough. So thinking about that, how are you feeding those sorts of needs? Social needs. We touched on it a little bit briefly, but it's that idea. Sometimes it's saying yes to go out, or to another Zoom meeting, or another cocktail conversation, or whatever it is, or is the phone call. And then sometimes it's saying no. So it's finding out where you are and where you need to go. Which way do you need to go? So right now, no one's going out. And so it's not necessarily going out to the party, but it's, how are you acknowledging? Because sometimes there are those things where you don't really want to get on the phone call. You don't really want to do the karaoke, the Zoom karaoke, or whatever it is. But once you get there, you do feel connected and recharged. So it's paying attention to those sorts of things. And then your sensory self-care. So this, I think, is often overlooked, but it's, what is the lighting where you are? What about the chair that you're sitting in? What are the smells? If there's a funk in where you're working, it's going to impact you as you continue to move on. So what are those sensory things that you do? I love the smell of cut grass. And I had a friend of mine who bought me, it's soap that smells like cut grass, because you can't just randomly run outside every day and cut your grass, because that would be weird. And if you start smelling your neighbor's lawns, that would be awkward. But it's a bar of soap. It's made by Soapy Paws. They're out of Long Beach, and the proceeds go to help rescue animals. But it smells like fresh cut grass. So I keep it in Tupperware. And when I stress out, I just smell my soap, because it helps calm me. Right? So it's a very small thing to do. I don't need to take half an hour to do it, but it's one of those elements, right? There are calm strips that you can put on computers that can kind of help ground you into those moments. But when we think about self-care, and this is what I really want to think about, as you continue to go through work and life, it's thinking about all of these elements and how they either charge or exhaust you, right? And then what can you move around, right? For some, cooking is therapeutic, right? Because there's smells that go with it. There's repetitive actions that go with it. All of those sorts of things are really great things. So that can be self-care. The other thing that's important to note when I talk about balance or harmony versus balance is if you get recharged by your job, you don't need to go home and take care of yourself. Now, this is not to say that if you don't get recharged from your job, quit. That's not what I'm saying. It's the idea of we've all had days where we go to work and we feel like we just, I'm going to say it, we kick ass and take names. Like everything is just rocking on all cylinders and we feel awesome. When you come home that day, you don't need to make sure that you're okay because your energy's already refilled. And then there's other days. In my office, my assistant and I joke about October 1st. October 1st was one of those days that everything could go wrong, did. And it wasn't huge things, but it was just little things enough that just totally jacked up the whole day, right? So at the end of that day, I needed a little more energy rejuvenation. So paying attention to where those are and what your needs are, it may not always be the same thing. There are going to be days, if you run a marathon, your physical exhaustion is going to need a little more energy, but you may be completely recharged emotionally and socially. So thinking about kind of this overall investigation of how you look at self-care, it really is a holistic perspective and you have to pick kind of what you want. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's also, this is a freebie. This isn't included in the sales pitch, but the 5 tips to healthy aging and living a long adult healthy life. As I taught adult development and aging a couple terms ago, are you ready? There's really no secret. You eat more veggies and leafy greens. You continue to move your body. You continue to have, use your brain. So continue learning things. You have a positive outlook and you maintain healthy connections. That's it. Those are the 5 things. So yes, Robin.
Repeat the last one. I think you kind of went out for a sec.
Oh, sorry.
Unless it was me.
Healthy connections. So they have found that being lonely is more harmful to your health than smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. So if you think about that, now it's being lonely, not being alone. So when we talk about people who are in quarantine, I'm kind of more of an introvert, so it's not as harmful to me as to the extrovert who needs other people. You can be in a room full of people and be lonely, and you can be all by yourself and be completely content. So, but being lonely, craving connection and not having that healthy connection is more harmful than smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. And we all know what we think about smoking, right? So I think that's really a key piece. But that other, so continue to use your brain, continue to use your body, make sure you move, have a positive outlook, eat leafy greens, healthy connections. So that's it. So I love this one picture where it says the 6 best doctors are sunshine, water, rest, air, exercise, and diet. And when it talks about diet, it's not just what you're eating, it's what you're ingesting with your brain as well. You can eat donuts, just don't eat the whole box. So it's that idea of what's your news diet, right? What kind of things are you looking? Yeah, so Brenda got an under desk treadmill so she can check emails and keep going. That's awesome, right? I don't even want to look at my pedometer anymore because it's a very, very sad thing as I walk the 10 feet from my desk to my kitchen. And I'm used to standing in a room and pacing too. So it's really bad. It's a bad news bears. But when we talk about that diet, it's everything we're taking in. What are we reading? You know, the book club is great because it makes you look at other things to read. If you're always watching Hallmark, life is probably gravy. But if you're always watching, I don't know, horror movies, you may have a slightly different perspective on things. And the other thing that's important to note, your brain is the most sensitive to input the first 30 minutes you're awake and the last 30 minutes you're awake. So if you're one of those people who wakes up and starts to check your phone and look at the news, you're impacting how your brain is going to react to everything for the entire day. And if you go to sleep scrolling, the same sort of thing. So if you can give yourself that half hour for happy news only, it's going to impact you more than even if you doom scroll in the middle of the day. So those first, that half an hour on each side is when your brain is the most sensitive to input. So I just wanted to pass that along. I also think this is really important. So I found these 2 recently. There are 2 types of tired, one that requires rest and one that requires peace. And I think that's a really important distinction to make because sometimes like It doesn't matter if you rest. I've told my husband a couple times that I'm really overwhelmed with things. He's like, well, take a day off. And my response is, it's not going to make a difference. Like I still need to get done what I need to get done. It's not about something that I can rest for. It's a greater perspective on life right now that is exhausting me. And I'm not going to be able to solve systemic racism if I take a day off. So, nor am I going to be able to solve it in a day either. So I will acknowledge that, right? But it's that idea that there are some different kinds of peace. And when we talk about rest, I found this yesterday, which I think is really interesting. It also goes at kind of that idea of self-care and that how you rest can change. So when it talks about here, sensory rest is, again, getting outside, fresh air, sunlight. There's a million things. I don't know about you, but if you've ever had a really bad day and then just getting fresh air and sunlight on your face just makes you feel a little bit better. It's not going to cure everything. There's also a great quote that all ails can be cured by salt water, either sweat, tears, or the sea. And so that idea that sometimes the ocean can be incredibly rejuvenating. The social rest, and this is what I love, is connecting with old friends that do not require you to give your full backstory because they already know it, right? We all acknowledge that there are some people that you have to kind of give them all the details. And then there's those people that all you have to say is, my mom called, and they go, I got it. And you don't have to say anything else because they've been around your mom. They know the crazy of your mother, or maybe my mother. And so they acknowledge all of what goes with that one statement. So that kind of rest. Mental rest is that meditation or grounding. Physical rest is, again, relaxation and sleep. That spiritual rest is reconnecting with purpose. The emotional rest is giving yourself an opportunity to not feel as intensely, right? So it's checking out of the news potentially. And then I think what's really important, creative rest, is finding inspiration. So some of those kind of link up to those other ones that make things, it's that intellectual rest. You have to be inspired as well as creative. So I think that's really important. So I really like this. I think it makes me happy. So hopefully you get some nuggets in that one as well. But specifically talking about COVID and what's going to help. So this is where I'm going to acknowledge, full disclosure, I suck at routines. I am incredibly anal about where things go and how things work. But to say that I do the same thing at the same time every day is a complete and utter lie. Midnight, I'm still working 90% of the time because I'm a night owl. So I'm just going to acknowledge that. But I will tell you, one of the best ways to cope through chaos is routines. They've also found what is referred to as revenge bedtime procrastination, where if you do not control all of your daylight hours because of children or work, we can tend to get to that sleep time opportunity and stay up too late because it's finally our opportunity for freedom. So if that pays it, so paying attention to some of those sorts of things, so building in that you time is really important when we talk about routines. Finding an opportunity to rest is really important. Boundaries are just that, what's okay, what's not okay. So I've signed on to be PTA president this year because no one else was going to sign up. But when I talked to the principal to just connect, she said, you can text me anytime. And my response to her was, you're allowed to just be mom on occasion because she has 2 kiddos. And I said, and not always be the principal, and you don't have to respond. Thanks, Gina. So it's that idea that we have to be able to say no sometimes. I work and I have my email on my phone, and it is not uncommon for me to check it before I go to bed because if there's that little red dot that says there's something new, I have to get it off of there, right? So I'm taking PTO tomorrow to be with my kiddos because they start school on the 11th. It's distance learning, but still there's going to be greater expectations that happen. So I'm not going to answer my email tomorrow. That's my goal. Realistically, I'll probably check it about 3 times. I just won't respond to everything, right? So, but I'm working on that. So I acknowledge that. I will not respond. So that's the boundary I've set. So I'll read it, but I won't respond to it. Because what else happens, particularly if you're in a leadership position, if you're responding to emails at 11 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you're communicating to your people, you're always available, and the expectation that you want them to be too. So there's that, we have to be careful because the first time you do it, it's great, but then it becomes something that's expected. And so being attention to those boundaries is really important. And so I think boundaries are becoming even more crucial. We're sitting here. I told my husband the other day, you're in my office at work. If you were in my office at home, you'd see a whole bunch of bookshelves behind you. But I said that what I've learned on Zoom calls is everybody else has less stuff on their walls than I do. And I know this because I put stuff all over my walls. Maybe I'll give you a tour of my office in here. And so the boundaries are hard because people are literally getting to see inside your homes, right? And so you can put that background on and then sometimes it goes all weird around your head. And so it's really difficult. And then how do you make those boundaries if you're working from home? So some suggestions are you have a change ritual. So if you think of Mr. Rogers, it's that idea he put on a sweater and he changed his shoes before he started and then he went back at the end. And although it may seem silly, it's that, they say, when you dress differently, you feel differently. There is an element of that. Now, I'm not saying that y'all have to get dressed for work every day because I'm not going to lie, I work in my pajamas when I'm at home, but there's a sweatshirt I wear when I work. I often also think with my hood on. So that's one of the ways that I can kind of use Pavlov to kind of condition myself to focus more in some ways. And then when it's off, my kids also know when it's off, they can come and hang out with me and talk to me about mom stuff. So sometimes it's really difficult setting those boundaries, right? I work more than I used to because I'm working from home, because I don't have to get home right away. So it ends up trickling into those nighttime hours. So it's something we have to be really conscious of. So setting an alarm, right? Maybe it'd be helpful, and giving yourself this. So this is what I have to do. And in those alarms, give yourself break in the middle of the day. You don't need to work immediately from 8 to 5 without a break and then give yourself relief at the end, right? We're not hopefully doing prison time. Give yourself breaks in the middle of the day, whatever those breaks may be. So make sure you fill those rest opportunities in there. Adaptability is also acknowledging that things are going to be different. I think as leaders and agencies, we have an opportunity right now to give grace to our people, to adapt. We're doing meetings via Zoom, but it also means we're all saving mileage on cars. We're allowing people that you can work right up to that time and then right after that time, or even if I'm shrunk on a corner, you can still type on the side and answer emails while you're in a meeting, because we know people do that, we're not gonna lie. So it's that we can change and shift. It also makes us realize what's really important, what do we need to do in a meeting, what really can be taken care of via email. So making sure that adaptability, that's harder to do sometimes because we are entrenched in what works and what has always worked. But kind of breaking those things apart. I'm actually kind of excited to be PTA president this year because my idea is this year is not going to look like anything it has in the past. And I'm really excited to try new things. And I attended the creative events safely so I can try and get ideas for PTA as well as for work. So it was a multitask activity. And then mindfulness, the idea of we just have to be in the moment. My husband is an Iraq veteran, so he talks about like when he was overseas and he was deployed, you could only do one day at a time. You had no idea what tomorrow was going to bring. You had no idea what was going to happen when you went outside the wire. You just had to take it one day at a time. And that's really all we can do. We can make all the plans in the world right now, but they may not happen. And realistically, this is not new. We've always had that, right? We really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Something crazy we could all win the lottery, right? If we played. I don't play, so I'm not going to win. But something horrific could happen or something amazing could happen at any moment. We don't know, but we've always lived under this misconception that we actually control what's happening next. It's now just being made blatantly apparent that we don't. So it's making sure that we come back and we connect to who we're with and where we are and what's going on and be in that moment. That's really, really important. And acknowledge when we don't, when it gets to be too much. Part of that adaptability is changing our expectations for ourselves. So when I was homeschooling my kids and working, I had really high expectations. And once a week for the first 4 weeks, I broke down in tears in front of my children. It was not pretty. It was not pretty at all. Then I changed my expectations because I realized there's no way I can work full-time and teach full-time and be mom full-time because, again, there's only 24 pickles in the jar. My children are now going into 4th and 6th grade. They were in 3rd and 5th, so they just turned 9 and 11. So they are old enough that they are not so little and I have to do everything, but they are also not old enough to totally cruise all on their own. So, but it's that idea of I had to acknowledge what I was really capable of, and we had to have some real conversations about, you know, you've got, mom's not making every meal, like breakfast is on your own, figure it out. No, you can't have popcorn for breakfast or chips for breakfast every day. So like part of those conversations were in there as well. So I think that's really important. So I want to focus on that. So that grace is for ourselves. This is part of the training I do for myself every time, because I still have unrealistic expectations for myself. It's grace for ourselves and grace for others, right? If you're living at home with someone else, you probably thought that it would be nice if they didn't live there for a couple hours, right? Like just a few, right? And then you come back, right? I'm not gonna lie. I love my husband, I really do, but there are moments where I was like, can you just go away for a day and then we'll be good again? So navigating that, it's about having grace for them too, because they're under the same situations, right? So we're going to be snottier with each other on occasion. We're reaching that window of tolerance. So we have to acknowledge it. And there's power in just saying where you are in the window, right? There's power if you've ever been hangry and you realize the reason you want to kill people is because you are hungry. As soon as you acknowledge that, you're not as angry. You may not have food, but as soon as you name it, it calms you down a little bit. So the power in naming is really, really important. So if we can see where we are and just say, I'm overwhelmed, I can't handle anymore, giving yourself an out can be really, really powerful. Sound good? Okay, so now we're actually going to do a practice. And the practice we're going to do is a gratitude practice. And the reason we're going to do a gratitude practice is gratitude is one of those things that you can do anywhere and everywhere in any situation. And if you actually do something where you thank someone else, gratitude is a practice that's a double whammy because it creates serotonin and dopamine in your brain and the other person. So that's why we're going to do gratitude. So you can pull out a piece of paper if you are a writer. You can sit and think if you are a thinker. You can pull out a notebook and draw pictures if that is how your brain thinks. So whatever you want to do. If you are more of a techie person and you want to save all the trees, you're welcome to pull out your phone and type. But somewhere, either mentally or on paper and somewhere, I want you to kind of document this list. And I'm going to give you 12 items. And you're just going to write down whatever comes to your brain. No one's going to see this. So if I ask, one of the questions I ask is someone you love. If the person who comes to your mind is not the person you live with right now, because maybe your 2 hours of wanting them to be somewhere else was this morning, we're not going to tell them which number that was. So you don't need to feel pressured to anyone, okay? So I want you to take a minute and either draw, write, or reflect on what makes you happy. Something, not some person, something that makes you happy. And if you want to type this, you are also welcome to type this in the chat box if you want to share and inspire others. I think we all know Brooklyn Nine-Nine makes me happy, so I'm just going to share that with you. All right, something useful. Food. Food makes me happy too. Something useful. That may be toilet paper. I mean, I think nowadays we have acknowledged that toilet paper is a useful commodity to people. Could be your phone, anything, sporks, they're underrated. Something, and this is specific, something that tastes good. I like cheese, if you need motivation. Tillamook, sharp cheddar is my favorite. Something that smells amazing. Reading a great novel and listening to Audible. Donuts, I do like donuts. Vanilla candle. If you are a fan of the smell of the earth after it rains, that is called petrichor. So there's a word for that. It's one of my favorite words. Something that smells. Something that makes a beautiful sound. Plumerias. Ooh, pine trees. Like, these are all good sounds. Something that makes a beautiful sound. Rain. Sharon, if you have Calm has their rain app, which is pretty nice. Gina is all in the pine trees. She wants pine tree smell with the wind. I think we can She needs to go into the forest. Waves, absolutely. Something that makes a beautiful sound. Next weekend I am. Yay! You're getting that rest. Don't work while you're up there. Something you enjoy looking at. So what do you like to look at? The ocean. Mm-hmm. Water. We have a lot of water babies here. Absolutely. I know this one's going to be a little more fun. Something that makes you feel safe. So what makes you feel safe? My hubby. Mm-hmm. 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 Something you love to do. And if you're going to share, make sure it's appropriate. Work appropriate, y'all. Something you love to do. So that may be reading again, right? Or listening to Audible. Go to the ocean, ride my bike, yeah. Walk in the morning, Liberty puzzles. Ooh, I like it. Puzzles are fun. Absolutely. So maybe brain puzzles. Game nights, right? Are coming back. Something that makes you laugh. So it could be a memory that you think of that makes you giggle, or a movie that you laugh at every time. Friends. So is that Friends the show, or Friends your friends? This crazy world. Your dog. My dog is hilarious as well. Yeah. Girlfriends, friends. Yeah, absolutely. Your favorite place to spend time alone. So again, that may be the ocean again, right? So it could be someplace in your home or a very specific place on the planet. But where do you like to go to spend time alone? On the couch watching TV. Mm-hmm. Mountains. Absolutely. Ocean. I do like the ocean. I like the sound of the ocean, the smell of the ocean, the feel of the ocean. It gets all my senses happy. It really does. All right, here it is. We're not going to tell who it is, but someone you love, right? And it can be different kinds of love. Me. I love that you love me, Gina. I love you too, Gina. Not in a way that would get me in trouble with HR. Oh, granddaughter. Yep. Kids are always fun. Sometimes they can be the people you want to not live with you for a couple hours too. It's okay. Doesn't mean we don't love them. Mom, very nice. Moms are good. Daughters, boss. Aww, that's so sweet. All right, here's the last one. And we're going to do something with both of these afterwards. Someone who helped you get where you are. This is someone you're grateful for getting you here. Scott Larson, yeah. Moms are good. Parents. Sharon, very cool. Sharon's on the call. Very nice that she's going to see that. So here's what I want you to think about. I want you to kind of look at your list or think about what you said and think about how can you connect with those things in the next week to help you with your energy, right? So when you want the person you live with, if it is your husband, to go away for a minute, think about how they make you feel safe. If you're getting frustrated with life, where can you go where you can smell vanilla, right? Maybe it is lighting the candle or doing simple things like that. So think about those sorts of things. And I want you to kind of take a minute to think of how you can build in that rest. And then the second thing, thinking specifically about that last one, who helped you get where you are. We don't have time because I didn't want to take too much of your time today, but if you want to really get a boost in serotonin and dopamine, write a letter to that person and tell them what they did and the impact it had on you. You will get the boost even if you do not send it, because just really focusing on being specific in that gratitude will create the neurotransmitters that really push that out in your brain. So you never have to send the letter, but thinking about your parents, do your parents know? Quite often when we're little, we are not very grateful to our parents at all. And as we get older, we realize the value that they have. So the example I often use is my dad, when he dropped me off at college, called my grandma and said he appreciated her, and he realized then how hard it was for him to leave home at 17. But my dad, when he dropped me off at college, was in his 50s. So you figure over 40 years had passed before he acknowledged what she had been through and appreciated what she was and who she was to him. So sometimes, even if it's your parents, just writing it down, think about how you feel when you get that handwritten note that says, I appreciate you, I love you for who you are. Like that's a really great feeling. So you get that for writing it, and they would get that as well when they receive it. So it really is kind of that double amazing gratitude experience. So that's why gratitude is the practice I chose, because it's so awesome on both sides. So so this is not a contrite thank you as you get your Starbucks and you leave. It's a genuine, here's what it is, here's what you did, here's how it impacted me. This is the real, that kind of gratitude letter is really, really important. So obviously you can't say it if she's passed away, but she can hear you if you say it. She can hear your thoughts, but not the bad ones. She can only hear the good ones. So when we think about that, so that's my challenge for you. If you would like to do it, you don't have to do it, because I don't want to add to your to-do list. So here's the other and last and most important thing. When are we supposed to do self-care, right? So we talked about earlier, paying attention to those signs that you're getting near the edges of your window of tolerance. And so if you've been somewhere, you may have seen this example. If you've been on a flight, not recently, but quite often this is the example people use as self-care. You have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people. But here's the thing. This happens when the plane is crashing. So this is too late to do self-care. So when do we want to do self-care? So we have a lot of ocean people. If you are a scuba diver, and scuba is an acronym which stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, just in case. But if you're a scuba diver, you know that you have to do some things before you jump in the water. So my dad was a master diver. Here are some things, and these are what I think are the best keys for self-care. You have to check your gear before you go. You have to check in on yourself before you walk into the chaos, whether that chaos is walking into home and all the expectations there, sitting down at a meeting for whatever it's going to be, walking into the office, having conversations with staff, which may not be the most exciting conversations because it's a really tough world out there. So whatever that is, you have to check your gear. You have to make sure that you're in the right space, that you're in the right frame of mind to have those conversations, because the beauty about scuba diving is that everyone's got a different level, right? So if you know anything about scuba diving, it's where you go underwater and instead of having a snorkel, you have a giant tank of air that's attached to you and you breathe through a regulator. But we may have the exact same size tank and I may go through my air faster, because how fast you go through your air is based on your age, your gender, I don't know why, your athleticism, all of those sorts of things. It makes a difference. So different people are going to go through air faster or slower based on what they're capable of. So you cannot make your self-care be the self-care for everybody, just like we can't judge if someone runs out of energy before we do, and we can't judge if someone still has energy when we're laying on the floor, right? Our energy management is uniquely us, so we have to make sure that it's just about us, and the only person we answer to is the person in the mirror, not anybody else. Never dive without a plan. Figure out where you're going and what you're going to do, right? So we have to have that idea of how this is going to happen. We have to be intentional about where we're going to take care of ourselves, so we make sure we have enough energy to get through life. Never dive without a buddy. Now, this doesn't mean you have to take a friend with you everywhere, because that may get a little cumbersome, but it's making sure you have someone to check in with. So if it's a work buddy who understands your chaos of work, if it's a colleague who understands your position, if it's someone who understands your family, but having someone to literally empty your cup with is really important. And that's what it's called. It's the theory of management of emptying your cup. You can't take on any more until whatever you've had that's blocking you is out of there. So if we're in a traditional business where we're driving to work and you almost get in a car accident on the way, you're probably not going to be able to really focus. excuse me, as soon as you get to work, right? You need to kind of debrief the potential car accident, and then you can focus on your day, right? So it's that idea that you have to get through there. Never exceed your comfort or ability level. Now, these are real rules for diving too, but it's that idea of there are moments we have to be able to say, no, I don't know. I can't get there yet. I have no idea. There is a significant amount of value to being completely honest as a leader and saying, I have no idea what life is going to look like in 6 months, because none of us do. And if we think we do, and you have a plan and you have real data, I'm totally down to get behind that, but I don't think any of us really do, right? We have no idea where life is gonna go. And being honest about that with our people builds more trust than pretending we know what's gonna happen. So yeah, it's exhausting, but we can build camaraderie with that as well. And then never hold your breath. So why this is important when you're diving is when you're breathing, you're not breathing pure oxygen, or you're breathing a blend that makes a difference. So if you go down to the depths and you hold your breath and come up, your lungs will actually explode. This is bad news bears. We don't want to do that. Why this matters when we're talking about self-care is when you hold your breath, you're failing to do anything. And we have to continue to keep moving forward. To quote another aqua person, Dory says, we just keep swimming, right? So we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep going, and we can do it. We just have to make sure that we pay attention to everything that's going on around us. So those are all of my tips and tricks for you. Is there any questions y'all may have?
Jamie, this was unbelievable. My mind is blown. I asked in the chat if you could send us the questions, the prompts, just for all of our 12 things. I think that would be a really neat exercise for people to take back and do with their teams.
Absolutely.
So just even send it to Robin, and then she can get it out to everybody.
Absolutely. Happy to do so. Any other questions? Because I'll give you my last slide, because I really like this one. We're basically just houseplants with more complicated emotions. Yeah.
Oh, this was so good. Any questions out there?
And I can send the PowerPoint too. I'm not.
Yes, that's what my next question was going to be. Could you send me the PowerPoint, please?
Absolutely. And so if people want to, if you want to grab this, change the name, you can use it with your staff.
No, this was wonderful.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Jamie, thank you for doing this. It's great. I loved how you were talking about kind of targeting the parts of those different types of energy that are being depleted and that need to be refilled, or kind of vice versa. When it is so chaotic and it kind of feels all blended together, do you have any advice for kind of how to pinpoint that a little bit? Because that's my question.
So I do the shower, and it's just being completely alone, and then having that kind of mindfulness minute. You really have to be by yourself, I think, for the first part, and then start bouncing ideas to kind of see what's bothering you the most. Like, where do you feel the most exhausted first? And there's a lot going on right now. So my stress nowadays, like I was telling my boss in supervision, I'm more stressed about what's going on in the world absent COVID than I am about COVID right now, although I'm still concerned about COVID. But, you know, the way the world is moving, I don't want to get political, so I'm trying to say apolitical here. But the way the world is moving, there's a lot of hate out there, and I don't sit well with that. And so kind of I really wish we could just all get along is really, really where I am. And so we did a cultural competency training on Tuesday, and it was really emotionally exhausting. And like I said, I'm not going to be able to solve systemic racism in a day. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of really hard conversations. So even when I feel exhausted, I also have to sit with myself and say, but it's something I can opt out of. So I can't really opt out of. I don't know if that's going to answer your question. You're just getting my brain tangent now, I'm sorry. So I think part of it is seeing what matters first now, and then also what can I do? What can I control, right? So I can't control what's going on in Portland, but I can control the conversations I have here. I can control what I eat. The easiest ones to start with are really those 6, you know, sunshine, water, diet, exercise. So it's kind of starting at the basics. Are you getting enough sunlight? I see you have a window, so that helps, but do you get to go outside and get fresh air? Because you can get some of those benefits by looking out a window, but it's not the same as the wind on your face, right? So making sure that you find time to do some of those things. There was a post-it that I had in the beginning of quarantine that basically said, am I getting outside today? Am I thanking someone today? Am I learning something today? Kind of like a checklist of really simple things that you could do. Am I creating something? I think was one of them. I don't know if I said that one. So I think it kind of starts there. And it's also what's most important for you. So I know my intellectual need is probably my biggest nugget, because it's just what I need the most. So I don't need to necessarily have to worry about that one, but I can tell you when I start to feel depleted because I'm producing too much and not getting enough in. I don't know if that helped at all, or if I just randomly tangented for, sometimes the cats I have to herd are in my brain. So.
It was great. Isolate, shut up for a second, and listen to myself. Awesome.
That was much more succinct.
Wow. Well, it's 5:03, so we won't keep everybody any longer, but we really appreciate, Jamie, your time and your just sharing your energy and your insight and your wisdom, and your slides are just so relevant. I took a picture of a couple of them. I'm going to post them on our social media. But just again, thank you for sharing. Just such gems. And yeah, Bertil says she's going to go outside, and I agree. I think we all just need to get outside and touch nature. And just be more present. And you're absolutely right. I thought about that. You know, it's true. We don't know what's coming. I don't know why we ever thought we did, but now it is just so exaggerated. And, you know, as I've shared with Robin before, you know, it's before the crisis, people are a certain way, and the crisis just, you know, exaggerates our best and our worst version of ourselves. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. So we're all learning. We're all going to come out stronger when this is all over. But people like you really help us navigate that. So we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank First Republic for being our sponsor. Just another plug, just, you know, we are in recruiting season. So if you know people that you think would like to be part of our network, make sure you reach out to Robin and myself. We are filling up our groups for 2021. We will have groups in 2021, whether they're all virtual, we don't know yet. But again, we're just so grateful that all of us could come together. So thank you, Jamie. Thank you to all of you that jumped on the call, and go to our YouTube channel and feel free to share the video, and Robin will put it up there shortly. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.